So, Boys on Film, talking about Memory today, which is a new drama from Mexican filmmaker Michel Franco. Sean is here. Do you remember New Order? We reviewed New Order.
Literally, oh my God, hello everyone. When I was like, it's Michel Franco, I was like, it's that film, New Order, that was set in DF in Mexico City, which was incredible. And God, it's a long time ago, Phil, since we reviewed that film.
I know, because you lived in Mexico, so there was a lot resonated with you, I think, from that film. But what an incredible film. I mean, so powerful in so many ways.
It was amazing because, like, I just think back to it, and we'll start with New Order, and maybe you can put a link to it somewhere because it's really good. I was in Mexico City for 3.5 years and had a Mexican boyfriend and was very much involved in Mexican life, and a lot of the things you saw with New Order with regards to haves and have-nots is massively amplified in Mexico City. That film really resonated with me and was very, very powerful. So I was very excited about Memory, which we're talking about today, which is his new film. Yeah,
and it's funny because New Order, I think, is one of those films that it takes you a while to really digest what's happened. And I kind of finished the film blown away by it, quite disturbed by it, but afterwards, like the weeks that, you know, came after, I kept thinking about it. It's one of those films that you just remember certain scenes.
It's a lot, but you're right. It's powerful, disturbing. It's weirdly urgent. Like, it's kind of like very now. It's very prescient. Like, fab film. If you haven't seen it, folk, go watch it. New Order by Michel Franco.
Strongly recommended. Something you're going to remember, definitely. But this is, I think it has touches of his, New Order film, but I think it's quite different in many ways. I think it's more sensitive. Definitely more sensitive than New Order.
More sensitive. So it's Peter Sarsgaard. Peter, put my teeth in.
Woof.
Peter Sarsgaard. He is hot. And Jessica Chastain, who I adore. And it follows the story of Jessica Chastain's character, who's called Sylvia. Sylvia is a social worker with a history and a past. And one day she comes across a guy at her school reunion who she believes she has some quite dark memories with. And he follows her home. And thus begins a relationship, in inverted commas, between Jessica Chastain's character and Peter Sarsgaard's character, which is all underpinned by memory, hence the title. But I think we can get into that, Phil, because I'm really intrigued to know your thoughts on it.
Yes, let's talk more about the story in a bit. But first, can I just also say that this film also stars Merritt Weaver, Brooke Timber, Elsie Fisher from 8th grade, Josh Charles, and, big drum roll, Jessica Harper, who you probably won't know from Suspiria because you're not a horror fan, but I'm sure you've seen Suspiria because it's arty, right?
Yeah, the Dario Argento film.
Yeah. I was like gobsmacked because I thought I recognised her face and I didn't realise who it was until the credits rolled. I was like, Jessica Harper, my God.
She's a big name. She's a big name. Well, she's very kind of cult.
So I was quite excited by that. But yeah, the story, quite a complex story. I think there's so much to unpack, isn't there, with this?
Yeah. So, like, let's start with Jessica Chastain's character. So Sylvia, she has quite a dark history, and you get the sense quite early on in the film that she has had a troubled schooling. Situations occurred at school and at home that have led her to be the person that she is today.
And she's quite frosty. I mean, in certain situations, there's a scene with her and her daughter, and they go out for lunch, and she's quite direct with the waiter who's
direct.
Yeah. And you can
because
kind of understand that
in her past.
With what she's gone through.
Because in her past, she has become quite a structured, no-nonsense individual.
Understandably.
It's symptomatic of what's happened in her past, and we can touch on it a little bit. I don't do too many spoilers. And then you have Peter Sarsgaard's character, who is an individual that has fundamentally short-term memory loss, short to medium-term memory loss. So he really doesn't remember anything. It's all quite scatty. And so you've got these two individuals, one with a slightly sinister background, and another individual who we don't really know much about his background, nor does he remember it because he has this short-term memory loss, who come together. And actually, initially, what you find is Jessica Chastain's character believes she's met Peter Sarsgaard's character at school and that he did something quite sinister to her regarding sexual abuse. Now, that actually is something she's disremembered. I think that's the interesting thing at play here, which is because her past is so dark and so sinister, she has built narratives out of that past, and she has disremembered things as coping mechanisms. And that stops her from having relationships, or when she does have relationships, it causes them to go awry because she genuinely believes things that aren't necessarily true. And then you have Peter Sarsgaard, who is really in love and starts to fall in love with Jessica Chastain, but can't really remember that relationship.
Yeah.
You put those two things together.
What a fantastic story, though. I mean, to be honest, when you write that down on paper, you would think, okay, that seems like it's a bit of a plot device and it could be quite insensitive. But what the director's done, I think, has given these two characters and the performances especially such a nuance that I think it's very sensitive and very sympathetic, I think, to what they've gone through independently.
I agree.
And also together.
Totally. And together. And I think what's amazing is their relationship is incredibly touching because Jessica Chastain's character never really lets her guard down, but she does. You see her for the first time do that.
Totally.
And trust somebody. And for Peter Sarsgaard's character, the same. He's kind of like, I've met someone and it's warm and loving and they love me for who I am. So their relationship is actually warm. And then there are these circles, which is basically their family that sit around it, that are quite sinister. Because when you think about it, he lives at home, Peter Sarsgaard lives at home with his brother and his brother's daughter. But there's a level of control there from his brother, which is, I also think, is slightly sinister. And then you look at Jessica Chastain's family, which is her mother.
Jessica Harper. I know, Wicked Witch of the West.
Jessica Harper, who is entirely estranged for reasons that we've kind of touched on. And these devices of control sit across both of them. So I find it amazing that they find this love and warmth with each other when actually their individual situations are quite cold and not particularly straightforward.
You're so right, because initially you would think, okay, so these two characters, maybe there's a darkness there and they're to blame for a lot of the problems, but actually it's the family, isn't it, when you think about it? Like you say, the family are the darkness that surrounds them and the problems that they encounter. A lot of it is to do with them.
His brother, weirdly, when Peter starts falling in love with Jessica Chastain's character, the brother is defensive of that, but I think that is because he's unnerved by it, because ultimately the brother lives in his house.
Yeah.
And so he tries to shut down this relationship, which actually is very warm and actually very healing, I think, for both of them. And at the same time, Jessica Chastain's family try and do something quite similar, where they try to besmirch her name in front of him to say, this woman is not who you think she is. So actually, the two of them outside of their family units are kind of happy together. It's the family units that are the sinister and dark elements of this, which I think plays out really well in the story.
Totally, because the brother seems quite resentful of having to look after his brother. Obviously, there seems to be a love to a certain extent, but I think he seems quite grumpy at having to do that, I think. And also, I guess, overprotective in a way, which I suppose a lot of families would be. They would want to wrap them up in cotton wool, but you just can't do that with people. They've got to live their life.
But yeah, I think there's something. I think it's explored quite nicely.
Yeah.
On both sides without labouring it, but also giving you enough to realise how these human beings are operating today. And
I like the fact that it takes its time as well, because the first half an hour I thought, where is this film going? I'm not sure if I'm going to be into this, but actually it took its time to really, tell the story and unpack what the characters have been through, their experiences. And I like that. It had a space to breathe, and I think the director definitely gave that space. I think it needed that space to nurture that relationship.
Nurturing's a good word, because I was thinking about then their relationship with the younger members of their family. So Jessica Chastain has a daughter and she's highly protective of the daughter. So she can't go out, she can't go to parties, she can't drink, she can't smoke, all these kind of things, because it's cause and effect of her own youth and growing up. So she's highly protective. But a daughter is sympathetic to that, I think. I feel like the daughter doesn't resent her for it. She's a teenager and she probably wants to do these things, but she also understands to some extent what her mother's been through, or as much as she wants to share. And I found the daughter really sympathetic to that. On the same side, Peter Sarsgaard's niece, I found, was sympathetic to the situation. Totally. It was the adults who actually had kind of crystallized around an idea and wouldn't let it go, but the youngsters were far more open to what was going on and far more kind of astute to the situation, in my mind.
Yeah, no, isn't it great though that you think, okay, these two lead actors, you've got Jessica Chastain, fantastic performance, Peter Sarsgaard, amazing performance, very, powerful, even though it's quietly powerful in some ways. Some scenes are You know, like I say, there's a lot of space. But I think it's a great supporting cast. And I love the fact that the director has respected their acting capabilities as well, because he's allowed them to have their own story, even though it really does focus on the two. But I think the other characters are equally important in telling that story, because, you know, obviously there's a lot of darkness that goes with it. So yeah, I think they've delivered. I think it's great. It's a great cast. Fabulous.
I'd like to see it again, actually.
Yeah,
I feel like it's one of those films where, I think, you know me, most films I'm like, put that in the bin. That was nonsense.
It's too long. 20 minutes too long.
20 minutes too long. God, I really dribbled on. But with this, I genuinely am like, oh, I'd like to see that again. It's a little bit like Past Lives, the Greta Lee film, which I watched it and then immediately was like, I want to watch that again. It's one of those films which, again, it's a bit like this, where you're like, oh, that's really stayed with me. And I feel like I've actually caught 60% of the movie. And actually, when I go back, like, I'd be like After Sun. Every time you go back and watch After Sun, you're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. It's one of those, I think. I'm putting that in that category where I'm feeling like I want to go and watch it again. And I watched it 2 weeks ago. So I'm a bit like, that for me is enough for me to give it a high rating, I think, because it's really drawing me back. Yeah.
Do you know why? I think it's because it's quite complex, yet in some ways simple. I know that sounds really contradictory, but I think it's because the way that it's been handled. I think, you know, they haven't thrown too much in and disrespected the ingredients. Do you know what I mean by that? I think it's very respectful and sympathetic, and I think the story is just so moving as well. The performance is obviously part of that.
What you see is, it is simple in a way, but human lives aren't simple. They are complicated, and people are irrational. And so what you see is you see cause and effect very quickly. You see someone doing something, you see the extent of how that impacts people. So that is really simple. It's just like you put something in, you get something out. The family cast is small enough to see the impact of that interaction without it being unwieldy, or without like us playing through every single character, or without us dancing over bits. It's just done very well. So yeah, bravo.
And very different to New Order in some ways, I think.
Very different to New Order.
Would you say that it? I mean, does it have the trademarks of him as a filmmaker, Michel Franco?
I think some of the components about control and the family hierarchy, yes, maybe, but it is a very different film.
It's a very human film, isn't it?
Yeah, it's emotional. It's got a softer core than New Order. I feel like New Order had a very different desire and outcome to this film.
New Order was shocking. I don't think this is shocking. It's intriguing, especially the first half an hour. I didn't know where it was going. I was like, because we're kind of sitting on the sidelines. We're watching Jessica Chastain's character at work and at home, and it's slowly telling the story, and then all of a sudden, wham, you're in there. It's like, okay, I understand what's going on.
There's some interesting set pieces that actually would translate to theatre very well.
Yeah.
Because the scene where Jessica Chastain challenges and confronts her mother is actually a one-camera shot into a room, which is actually pretty quite powerful, because you keep the focus on the dialogue and the acting rather than anything whizzy. So I loved all of that, and I do think it would translate very well to theatre.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great. As I said, I do want to watch it again.
Yeah, it's an intelligent movie. Star rating. What's it going to be, Sean Vickers?
It is a very strong 4.
Yeah, it's a very strong 4 for me.
It may be that in 6 months' time we talk about it and I'm like, I've seen it 3 times and it's 5. But right now, my first go, I'm like, yeah, I really, really loved it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great piece of cinematography. Excellent.
Fabulous to see you as always, Sean. Thank you everyone for watching. Check out our review of Michel Franco's other movie, which is New Order, on the screen now. And if you like what you've watched today, click subscribe for more content and join the conversation. We'll see you next time.